back! Usually you do not see my face, and this is also a first time for me. But I think that is an important moment. Finally, I'm out of college, so now I can follow with the reference series, one of the most important in the channel, even if you do not agree. So I think that is fair to finally go back and go and look at the references of the Generation 4 of Pokemon. And if you're enjoying content like this, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It's gonna help the channel and it's gonna help me to make better content. So let's start with the video, shall we? As usual, we're gonna start with the starters. Why? Because they're the first in the bucket, as we're just expecting. And a common factor in this is that we're gonna start with the grass type. In this case is Torterra, which is inspired by the black tortoise, also known as Genbu, which is one of the 4 symbols of the Chinese constellations. However, there's also a small fun fact of media, which is that in the past the people believed that Torterra was the one that held the war on its back. Kinda like Apollo, but being a cool reference to the great Atwing from Discworld. Yeah, I did not expect a Discworld reference in Pokemon either. And also, some of its parts are referenced to the Ankylosaurus. Next, we got Infernape, which in this case is one of the most clear references of all time. Infernape is obviously based in a monkey, or rather an ape, but is also referencing the song Wukong, a religious creature for the Chinese mythology that it also serves as a reference for a character known as Goku. Oh, so we can say that Goku is also in Pokemon. And because it wouldn't be a new generation without it, we have the water starter Empoleon, which, as usual, has the most boring inspiration of them all. Although at least is cool enough of itself, being inspired by the Emperor Penguin, while also getting potentially a reference of Poseidon with the trident that it has in its head. That, as I'm saying, is much better than Feraligatr and Blastoise. Also, following the trend of uninspired first route birds, we have Staraptor, which is inspired by a bird of prey. Nope, not that one. No, not that one. The other one. Yeah, that one. Which they are also known as raptors. Nope, not those ones. Nope, yeah, those ones. And knowing that makes me understand that, yeah, Staraptor is a really original name. We also have the Bidoof evolutionary line, which is inspired by which is inspired by beavers. Then we have Cricketune, which is inspired by a cricket, if you didn't notice by its name, or you know the sound that he makes when... yeah, whatever that is. Luxray, for my disappointment, does not have a genuinely unique inspiration other than being a Felidae. Don't confuse it with cats. He's a big cat. At the very least, its name is a cool reference, being a reference to lux, which is light in Latin, and also ray being a reference to X-ray. Then we have Roserate, which is inspired by a rose bouquet, but also is inspired by a masquerade ball. No, not masquerade, masquerade. Which is a cool small fad, and not being just flowers, like the Rafflesias. And going with the fossils of this generation, the Rampardos evolutionary line is inspired in the Pachycephalosaurus, while Bastiodon is inspired in the Ceratopsidae. Hey, when are we gonna get really cool dinosaurs like the one with a really long neck or a T-Rex? I don't know. I feel like that will never happen, but who knows. Then we have the Burmy evolutions, which are actually not linear, but rather 2 completely different months. The first one being Wormadam. Then outside of the fact that it's evolving from a bug, it actually doesn't reference any specific bug for some reason, which makes it like the first really boring Pokemon of this gen. But hey, I guess that the next one is gonna be really good, which is Motim, which is inspired by a mod. At least this was the first one, I guess. Yeah, congratulations, Motim. You were the first and the most forgettable of mods. Then we have Best Queen, which is inspired by a queen bee, but not only that, but also is inspired by the beehive as a whole. Also, did you know that out of all of the combis, only one in A is a female, therefore only one in A can evolve to a Best Queen? That's a cool reference to the fact that queens never cry. We also have Pachirisu, which is inspired in a squirrel. But you know that you do not want to hear about that when we talk about Pachirisu. You want to hear about the fact that it won a world championship. And you're gonna hear from it again. Like right now, I just said it. Like, I have nothing else to explain. We also have Flotsel, which is inspired by a whistle. Cherrim, which is inspired by a cherry. And Gastrodon, which actually has a genuinely interesting reference. And is that it is inspired by the Chromodoris Loki, or Lox Chromodoris Slug. Yeah, it's a slug. The most interesting reference so far in like 10 Pokemons have been a slug. But don't allow those weak and boring Pokemons to let you down, because the next one, Ambipom, is inspired by a monkey. And now, as the next reference, we have... Wait, something that is actually interesting? The Driflim evolutionary line is inspired by both regular balloons and actual aerostatic balloons, which is pretty cool, especially considering how they kidnapped children and left them to really far away places. Really cool Pokemon if you ask me. Then we have Lopunny, which is inspired by a bunny, but that's not the only reference of Lopunny, but also she is inspired by... Miss Magius is inspired by the Hatman. Wait, that's not what it says in the script. Miss Magius is inspired by a Banshee, while its hat is inspired by the Hatman. What do you mean that is not the Hatman? Which apparently is inspired by a wizard. Then we have Purugly, which is inspired by a fat cat. Chingling, which is inspired by a slide bell, also known as a Jingle Bell, Schildem Farnich nie, durch den weißen Winterwald Ubenzugen from See. Hey! Apparently that's the letter in German. Like, look at this, it's very fun. We also have Skunk Tank, which is inspired by a skunk, if the name wasn't clear enough. And Bronson, which is inspired by a bell, but not any type of bell, but rather a dotaku. Not an otaku, a dotaku, which was a Japanese bell made of bronze that was used during the Yayoi era. Dotaku, Yayoi, yeah, these people is not gonna fool me. As you know, I do not talk about the babies, so I'm gonna skip Bonsley, Mime Jr. and Happiny, because they already had their regular references in other videos. Who does have a new reference is Chatot, which is inspired by a yellow-colored lovebird. Or, if you look at its name in Spanish and directly translate it, it would be the Mask Undividable. And with a genuinely interesting reference, we have Spiritomb, which is inspired by Water Margin, one of the first Chinese novels in which a group of 108 outlaws went and gathered at the Mount Liang to rebel against the government. Yeah, apparently Pokemon decided to go with the approach of all of them straight up dying and being consumed by a rock, but I think that it's cool nonetheless that they decided to make a reference like that. That's better than 80% of this generation apparently. Then we have the one and only Garchomp, which is inspired by a hammer shark, while also being inspired by a jet. Because yeah, apparently having a dragon type pseudo legendary that was weak ×4 to ice, being a reference to jets, was not enough. so they decided to give it to another one. Lucario apparently also doesn't have a specific reference, other than the fact that it's a canine that can feel aura. Wait, aura. Please don't go with one of those edits of basketball players with aura. Please, no! Oh, that was really good. Hippowdon was inspired by a regular hippopotamus. 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 While Drapion was inspired by a scorpion. And Toxicroak actually having a slightly more interesting reference, being inspired by the blue poison dart frog, which is a venomous frog, or poisonous. Venomous, poisonous, I don't know the difference. I'm not a venomologist, I just like venom. Then we have Carnivine, which is inspired by a carnivorous plant, but more specifically the Venus flytrap. Luminion, like other different Pokemons, is inspired by a abyssal fish, and Mantike, which is inspired by a giant oceanic devil ray. Oh, sorry, I wanted to say a giant stingray. Oh, no, wait. An oceanic manta ray. How many names does this thing has in English? Obama Snow is inspired by a pine, but not only that, but he's also inspired by a Yeti, or more specifically, the abominable snowman. While Weavile is still inspired by a whistle, just like its pre-evolution, Magneson has a new inspiration, which is that he is a reference to UFOs. All Licklicky, Rhyperior, and Tangrowth keep the exact same reference as its pre-evolutions. Wait, how many new evolutions did we had in Gen 4? I forgot. Really? Man, that's a lot. And because I'm bored of saying the exact same thing, I'm gonna say that Electivire, Magmortar, and Gliscor, and Porygon, and Probopass, all of them are the exact same thing as their pre-evolutions, just with new advanced designs. Well, at least Probopass has a new small reference in the red cylinder in his head, which is called a Pukao, which was something that was put in the Moais long in the past. And also its mustache is made of iron apparently, which is also another reference. I guess that at least he's better than the other ones in that regard. Yeah, please move me out of these ones. Now with Pokemons that do have new references, Togekiss is inspired by the Peace Dove. Genmega has an actual new reference from being just a regular dragonfly to being a Mega Neura, which was a giant firefly from hundreds of years ago, which makes sense that he's a giant Mega. What? I thought that it was funny. It's not my fault that your sense of humor is better than mine. Leafeon and Glaceon, even though they do not have unique references, they are new compared to Eevee. Leafeon being inspired by leaves, and Glaceon being inspired by ice. You also have Mamoswine, which is now inspired by the woolly mammoth. We also have Gallade, which is inspired by both a knight and a musketeer. Dusknoir, which outside of the regular references of Dusclops, is inspired by the electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, which is a common practice to try and find ghostly sounds. Does that work? Well, it works in Phasmophobia, so it must be true. And to finish up the new evolution of old Pokemons, we have Frostlass, which is inspired by the Yuki Onna. And now, going for the big part of the Pokédex, we have the Legendaries, the Mythicals, and Rotom, which in this case is inspired by the Tsukumogami, a Japanese yokai that usually lives in different objects, in which the most common of them are electrodomestics. Then we have Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, in which all of them were inspired by pixies. Yeah, all three, none of them has anything unique. Then we have the legendary duo of this generation, Indialga and Palkia, which both of them have not a genuine inspiration. They have clear reference of bipedal and quadrupedal dinosaurs, but not a unique specific reference. The only thing that they actually got is that Dialga has an actual diamond on its chest and Palkia has an actual pearl. So yeah, a small cool reference to the games, but no reference to anything else whatsoever. And although Hitran also doesn't have a unique reference, it has a set of references, referencing all of the myths of living creatures inside of volcanoes. In the case of the Regigot, we have Regigigas or Regigaigas, which is just once again inspired by golems, just like every legendary Pokemon in the Regis trio, or foursome, or hexasome, now with Regidrago and Regieleki. Why the hell are there so many Regis now? Giratina, that obviously has a reference for demons, but we cannot say that in a Pokemon game. So, the one that Junichi Masuda itself mentioned is that it's inspired by the antimatter. If you actually pay attention to the lore, it actually makes a lot of sense that the Pokemon outside of space and time is referenced by antimatter. Then we have the beautiful Cresselia, which is inspired by the moon. Both Fiona and Manaphy are inspired by the Cleonidae, or what is commonly known as sea angels, while also having a reference to droplets. Darkrai, just like Cresselia, is partially inspired by the moon, but he has another really obscure reference that barely anyone knows about. Yeah, the pitch black Pokemon that is a pure dark type that has a move called Dark Void that puts other Pokemons to sleep and that has an ability called Bad Dreams as a really obscure reference to nightmares. I know that barely anyone knows about that, but it was just something to mention, something really unknown to everyone. Shining is a reference to both hedgehogs and flower bouquets, which is weird that they decided to reference multiple times in the same generation something like bouquets. I get something like monkeys that has happened, but bouquets? And to finish it all off, we have the most important mythical of Generation 4. In Gen 1, we had Mew, which is, at least in theory, the father of the Pokemons. In Gen 2, we had Celebi, which was an onion. In Gen 3, we had
Deoxys,
which was the DNA Pokemon. I expected to be a disappointment, but knowing who it was obvious that it was not gonna be. Because the reference starts with the name Arceus, the actual creator of all of Pokemon. Such an important Pokemon that its own name references the most important god of two different mythologies, being Ar, the reverse of Ra, the most important god of the Egyptian mythology, and Zeus, a reference to Zeus from the Greek mythology. Its whole body is a reference to the Killing, a legendary creature from Chinese mythology. Said creature is said to bring the arrival or the death of an important being, and it's no wonder that they decided to make one of the most majestic Pokemons into a reference like that. It also apparently has a reference in which Arceus hides 1,000 golden arms, which is a clear reference to the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. After going with 2 out of 3 bangers, at some point I said, well, they're gonna screw it kinda in the references, just like Celebi. But unlike Celebi, and actually unlike any other, Arceus has the coolest and most impactful references out of any Pokemon, period. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you all enjoyed it. I know that I have not posted this type of video in a long time, so I might be a little bit rusty. However, I'm still doing this for you all, because I promised that this would be a series that I would finish. And as such, I will finish this series. So yeah, I hope that you all enjoyed it once again, and without anything else to explain, see you next time. Bye bye.